buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com. Sorry. I just looked down and for a second there, my voice was going to be like this. And it was one of those things luckily, I guess I saw the light because that would have been a little shocking this morning. Anyway, good morning. Hey, welcome to the program. Thanks for coming in and joining us. It is the Tuesday edition of the Michael Dukes Show. And we are ready to go here on this slightly rainy August morning. Fair weather, you know. You can always tell when it's fair time because the weather turns, and that's how it goes. We are jumping into it today. Tuesday means, of course, the weekly top three with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and we're going to be talking with him here in just a moment. Going over the weekly top three, the big three stories for the week. Which, boy, there's some interesting stuff in there today. I can't wait to dive into it and talk about it. And then in hour two, we'll be talking you'll be talking with me as I kind of commentate on that and a few other stories that are going up around here, including this latest piece from Claire Stremple over at the Alaska Beacon about schools, man. The schools, it's just the one, you already can see it. They're already working past the election, and they're propping it up for the next session. You can see it already. Oh, this is so bad. The schools, they only had that one-time funding, man. They need more. And then we'll finish up this morning with Chris Story, because we'll need it by then. We will definitely need it by then. A little bit of a pick-me-up from Chris Story on that this morning. Okay, what else we got? That's it. Friday. I will be off on Friday. And we'll see what happens from there. That's kind of what's going on. All right. Before we do anything else, let's just move on over here to this. And whoops, I don't know what happened there, but we'll fix it. We're going to bring Brad Keithley on, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And he's there right now. I don't know. I lost myself, but we got Brad here. Good morning, Brad. How are you? Good morning.
This is a morning when you say I need a producer to yourself?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's all good as long as we got the audio. It's the only thing that's all that matters, right? So we're all good. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top three continues. All right. Well, let's jump into this, Brad. First and foremost, we got stuff to talk about here, and there's a couple doozies in this whole thing. So let's start off with the whole question of whether or not Alaska's economy, is it up or down? Does it matter who you talk to? Is the economy up or down? There's a lot of doom and gloom, and it all starts off with this editorial from the ADN, which I found fascinating for the addition of one sentence, but we'll get started there. Go ahead and give it to us.
We'll see if it's the same sentence I want to focus on.
Yeah. Exactly.
This week's segment on the economy was going to be upbeat, right? It was going to be right. It was going to be the AEDC, the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation, had their annual lunch, and where they released their business confidence index, their report on how businesses in Anchorage feel about Anchorage, and the headlines sort of tell the story. It was a positive report. Alaska News Source news survey suggests Anchorage businesses slightly optimistic about economic future. Alaska Public Media, Anchorage businesses are optimistic for the future, new report shows. The ADN news side, Alex DeMarvin, Anchorage construction booming while overall job numbers return to pre-pandemic levels, data indicates. Even up in Fairbanks, Jomo Stewart gave a presentation to the Greater Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce, and the headlines for that in the Newsminer is Economics Report brings better than expected outlook. Not all roses and sunshines and kittens, but nonetheless a positive report, an upward-looking report from the Fairbanks Newsminer. So you've got all of these reports and all of these headlines painting a positive picture of what various businesses in Anchorage and up in Fairbanks are saying about the state. Then you come to the ADN, the editorial page, and I think this is telling against all of these other headlines that are positive and upbeat. Here's the ADN's weekend editorial, the headline for the ADN's weekend editorial. With Alaska population forecast to decline, can we avoid economic disaster? And it's like, okay, I'm starting to get this. Even if things are looking up, even if there's a positive coming out of the annual AEDC lunch, even if the construction forecast is up, even if the employment numbers are up, even if Fairbanks is looking positive, by gosh, the ADN op-ed page is going to be doom and gloom because they want to go after their favorite subject. And this is the sentence I wanted to focus on. Down in the you sort of read down through, and they list a number of factors about why it's doom and gloom. And then finally, the state's fiscal uncertainty is perhaps the single greatest factor that will determine whether Alaska follows the path of decline or charts a course of renewed prosperity. If the legislators and the governor persist in stonewalling structural fiscal solutions in the name of paying out as large a permanent fund dividend as possible, they will not only be ignoring the need for a sustainable long-term plan, but will also foresee deep cuts to services like state public safety and education that are instrumental in maintaining Alaska's quality of life and outlook on raising their families here. No, they won't be forcing deep cuts. Yeah. There are other ways. If you want this stuff, and the ADN says they want this stuff, if you want this stuff, there are other more equitable, broad-based, better ways to pay for it. Paying a PFD, taking the portion of the money set aside for Alaska's residents, and distributing that as required by statute, still required by statute, never changed statute. Distributing that by statute does not mean there have to be cuts elsewhere. It just means you have to find other ways to pay for the stuff that you claim you want. You, ADN editorial board, you, Binkley family, have to contribute to the costs through broad-based taxes. Then they said the one thing, the last sentence is one that really, it just convinced me that they're going to take whatever news is out there and just twist it against the PFD. It's all about the PFD in their minds. I had a legal case once where it was in the press a lot. It was in the lower 48 and it was in the press a lot. And regardless of the fact that was in the hearing, the opposing counsel just took it and twisted it into a negative, regardless of whether it was a positive fact, whatever kind of fact it was, he just twisted it and put a negative spin on it. And that's what the ADN's doing. Here's the last sentence. Nobody moves to Alaska for the PFD. They come because of our wide open spaces, natural beauty, and rugged individualistic ethic. They will only stay if they can see opportunity on the horizon. Okay, so the PFD reduces the cost of living in Alaska and makes it more affordable to live here. It gives seed money to individuals to pursue their rugged individualistic behavior.
Right.
It gives them money to be able to distributes money to be able to live in the wide open spaces and the natural beauty. But, oh my gosh, the ADN doesn't want that. They don't want, the Binkley family doesn't want that out there. They want the top 20% non-resident industries, tourist industries. Remember who the Binkley family, remember the other side of the Binkley family. Tourist industries, the non-resident, the industries funneled or fueled by non-residents. And the oil companies, they want them to have, the wide open spaces, natural beauty, and individualistic ethic cost-free, because they want to shove the cost down to the other 80% of Alaska families. So it just struck me as really sort of highlighting how out of touch or how centered the ADN editorial page is on finding bad things and twisting or twisting anything into a bad thing by comparing the headlines between the positive headlines that otherwise were in the papers, even their own paper on the news side, and then the bad headline that they managed to twist into.
What I found interesting about and I agree with you 100%, but what I found interesting about this whole thing is they spent the first half of the article being pretty much doom and gloom. They're like, oh, there's a bright spot here and a bright spot there, but pretty much here's all the bad things that could happen. Then they spend, it's right above the quote that you just made, they spend a couple paragraphs. They're like, oh, well, here's what we really need to do. We need more of this. We need more governmental control of our housing, and we need more help in governmental housing, and we need more help in the childcare sector and everything else. And then there's this one sentence that's a throwaway that stood out. This proved to me more than anything else that this was an article written by committee, because it seems like somebody got one line in there trying to make a point that is totally disconnected from anything else. In the paragraph where it talks about specifically about childcare, which is, of course, one of the new big issues, right? That's one of the new big issues. We just gave $7 million to it, and they want more. They said, while the recent legislation to address child care issues is helpful, it's not enough to fix a structural and deep-rooted issue like housing. Again, another thing they wanted government help with. Child care deficit has multiple causes, from wage rates and highly competitive labor market to a shortage of training and licenses. And as a recent study found, the true costs of child care are considerably higher than what state funding will cover, meaning we need more state funding. And then this is the sentence. We need a robust economy unburdened by excess government intervention so that wages can rise and workers can afford to pay for their child care providers a fair fee. This entire article has been talking about government intervention in the market as a good thing and why we need it. And they get this one throwaway sentence that one of the committee members of the board was able to get in there, but it's totally out of place with the entire rest of the article. I mean, it just shows me that they are, again, a whole article written by committee where they gave the guy whoever wrote that gets the one sentence, and then everything else is, we need more government lucre. We need more government dough to make all this happen for that rugged individualistic ethic. We need more government dough for the rugged individualists out there. It's insanity. It is absolute insanity.
It is, and that's a great sentence to focus on. We need a robust economy unburdened by excess government intervention so that wages can rise and workers can afford to pay. So we need to take money away from 80% of Alaska families. We need to tax 80% of Alaska families through deep PFD cuts, middle and lower income Alaska families, the ones that are leaving the state. We need to take money away from them so that we can spend it on other things, and wages can rise and workers can afford to. We need to make sure they can't afford it by taking money away from them, so they can afford it because government will spend it instead on certain things. It's sometimes they just get tied up in their own knots trying to find ways to attack the PFD, and that's all this is, Michael. It's painting a doom and gloom picture against all of the headlines, even on their own news side, against all of the headlines that are talking about the positives in the state and the increased employment and the increased construction jobs. Against all the positives in the state, they need to twist this around, find the bad thing, and twist it around so it's the PFD's fault. And it's just, I get it, guys. I get it. You don't want to pay for government. You want a lot of government services. You want childcare. You want housing. You want all sorts of things that government the government pays for. You want government contracts. I get all that. You want high government wages. You want pension plans. I get all of that, but you don't want to pay for it yourself. I mean, that's the part that just drives me insane. You don't want to pay for it yourself. You want to push that burden to middle and lower income Alaska families. Only middle and lower income Alaska families. I mean, that's right. That's what the PFD targets. That's a targeted tax on middle and lower income Alaska families.
So I got less than a minute here, Brad. So what is the answer? Is the economy up or is the economy down? I mean, it seems like we're on a bit of a rebound. There's some good things out there, but again, the ADN is going to turn everything into a pile of stinking fish. So where are we at? What do you think, really?
Oh, I think the economy is rebounding. I think we're rebounding from a low. So we're not, if you compare it to where we've been, historically in other times, it's not comparing great, but we're rebounding. I mean, we're coming off the mat. We're coming back up. People are building things. People are investing in things. People are opening new businesses, and I think we're rebound. We're coming off the mat. The ADN op-ed page doesn't like that though.
No, they want that again. It's back to that government dependency, right? That's what they want. They want a dependency state. To the ADN, the government is the economy. And so that's really what it comes down to. All right, we got to go here. Hour one continues. Brad Keithley comes up next with number 2 of the weekly top 3 right here on the Michael Duke Show.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. I think Donna points out the one thing, this is a truism that you can find pretty much everywhere, is that subsidizing childcare, housing, college, etc., only raises the cost of those things. Anytime something is subsidized, you will watch the cost of it explode. Why? Well, because there's all this free money around it, right? That's what look at what happened with again, college tuition is the biggest, broadest example of that. The second that they started subsidizing it, college, tuitions increased 400% over the course of a handful of years because all of a sudden they knew there was all this free money out there to do it. So crack it up, just crank it up. We'll just make it happen. And that, of course, forces the need for more subsidies and more. And it's this, again, it's a doom loop. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. We're going to see the same thing in this. We're going to see the same thing in this childcare issue. We're going to produce it now. And you could already see they're saying, oh, it's what did they say? It's just not enough. A recent study, the true costs of childcare are considerably higher than what state funding will cover. Well, yeah, first of all, why is state funding covering it at all? If the state would get out of it, maybe we could reduce the cost of it. But instead, the state's involved in every level of it, including all the regulation and everything else. Of course, it's more expensive.
And think what's going on, Michael. And it's not just in childcare, but that's a good example. Think what's going on. All right, so we've got middle and lower income Alaska families who need childcare in order to have jobs. That's one of the rationalizations for it. So we're taking money out of their pockets through PFD cuts. We're taking money out of their pockets to give it back in the form of subsidized childcare. And, the top 20% is enjoying the subsidized childcare as well. And they're not having to pay for it, but we're taking money out of the pockets of these people to afford to give it back in terms of subsidized childcare. So we're making them poorer, in need of even more subsidies to have the standard of living that the state thinks they need. And then, as you're right, as the demand increases and the costs go up, we need more subsidies. So we'll take more money out of their pockets. It's a vicious circle. I mean, one of the things that Matt Berman talks about that I just think is absolutely correct and fascinating. He says, look, we're making people poorer. We're putting more people below the poverty line by taking the PFD than through any other fiscal step we could do. So we're pushing people down below the poverty line, or we're pushing them down below the 130% of poverty line, whatever kicking point there is for a government program. We're making them poorer, kicking more people into government programs, increasing the cost of those government programs, and as a result, needing more government spending to maintain the same level of programs, because we just expanded the programs to take more money out of people, make more people poorer. It's just, it's just a constant doom loop, death loop that you're creating out of doing that when you target middle and lower income Alaska families, which is exactly what the PFD cuts are doing. So it's yes, we're increasing costs. We're decreasing the ability, the target market. We're decreasing the ability of the target market to pay for costs. We're increasing the cost, decreasing their ability to pay. So we have to increase the subsidies. So we then take more out of their pocket. It is the most insane government fiscal policy on the planet.
Well, and that's the whole point of the dependency economy, right? I mean, that's what they've done. They created a dependency state. And so that government becomes essentially the center of it all. It's just, again, this spiral, this doom loop, this self-licking ice cream cone. Ice Near Wolves over on Rumble says, is the economy better, or has individual debt just increased? And I think the economy is doing better. Yes, individual debt probably has increased, but overall, especially some of the new housing, and you could see some of the talk about some of the new booms that they're doing and construction and stuff in Anchorage and some other things. I think there's some positives. It's not all wine and roses, but it's getting better. And I think, but individual debt has increased, just like national debt. I mean, we got to learn to live within our means and pay for what we got. That's part of our problem as a society, is my opinion. And Brad can comment on that, I guess, when we get back if he wants to. But otherwise, we're going to move on to number 2. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do whatever you got to do. Subscribe on Rumble. Let's get it going on.
The Michael Dukes Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Oh, yeah. We're continuing on with the weekly top 3. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Number 2, we saw it in the paper the other day. This new Texas company, Excelerate, has announced that they're in some kind of negotiation for new gas. And I mean, a lot of people saw this as a positive, maybe that some of the emotional ties to the only Alaska gas solution being, put aside, that maybe they're actually seriously looking at, and it seems like Chugach Electric is more focused on this than NSTAR, but, that maybe this means that we're actually seriously looking at LNG imports as a solution instead of just waiting around for Alaska gas to magically materialize. Brad, what do you say?
Well, I think it is a positive development. It was humorous to me, to tell you the honest truth, humorous to me to see all the headlines about Accelerate's announcement, referring to them as a Texas company. Texas company seeks LNG import facility in the Cook Inlet. That's the Alaska Public Media. The Peninsula Clarion is Texas-based company touts proposed Cook Inlet LNG import terminal to investors. And the ADN was Texas-based company. So they were all focused on the Texas-based company. It's headquartered in the Woodlands outside Houston, but it's really an international company in terms of its operations, which should give us some comfort. It is a company that has experience in this industry. It's a company that has a lot of recent experience, a lot of recent development in this industry, and I think it's a positive thing. What Excelerate does is not uniquely. I mean, there are other companies that do this, but Excelerate is sort of out in the front of the industry. What they do is they do floating storage and regasification units, FSRUs, and the what that does is you load LNG on a ship. You bring the LNG up to the market that you're serving, and then you hook that ship to an onshore gas line, and you regas the LNG on the ship. You don't need an onshore regasification facility.
It's basically a portable regasification unit. Instead of having to build onshore infrastructure, you rent the ship, and it basically does the work there, and you don't have to build permanent infrastructure onshore.
Right. And the thing that I found interesting, well, a couple of things I found interesting. One, it was Excelerate that announced that they were in advanced negotiations or advanced discussions with Alaska utilities. All of the Alaska utilities declined to comment on Accelerate's announcement. Excelerate announced it as part of their quarterly earnings call. What you want to do when you do when a public company does a quarterly earnings call, you want to highlight what you've just achieved, and you want to identify things ahead that are going to continue to excite the market and continue to excite stockholders. And so they announced Alaska and a project in Vietnam that they're working on at their quarterly conference call. They didn't have to. You don't always have to announce projects you're working on. You do that in order to excite the stock market. There's not a requirement that you do that. So they didn't have to do it, but they did it. And then the Alaska utilities just sort of refused to comment on it. So that tells me a couple of things. It tells me that the Alaska utilities really aren't yet quite ready to announce what their going forward plan is. They may be looking at other alternatives instead of Excelerate. They maybe aren't ready to file things with the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, and they don't want to get too far out in front of themselves. But it is a good development. The other thing that it was intriguing was Excelerate announced that the negotiations were for them to be the gas supplier. And so they would bring the gas up. They would buy the gas wherever they're going to buy the gas, source the gas wherever they're going to source the gas, bring it up on the ship, and then offload it and sell it to the utilities at a delivered price. And sometimes LNG is that. Sometimes LNG is you buy it, you buy the LNG, the customer buys the LNG from somebody else, and you just have a ship chartered to bring it up. I think that's probably a good thing that they're negotiating with Excelerate for that, because it will cut down on the new things that Alaska utilities need to be doing.
You're talking about a delivered price, right? You're
Right.
talking about to negotiate essentially a delivered price where the rental of the offshore gas unit and everything else, it's all wrapped up into one price. We will deliver it for X. That's all inclusive. We drive up, plug into your system, give you the gas, this much per cubic square foot or whatever, and that's it. That's what that kind of pricing is. It takes takes the guesswork out of it.
Takes the guesswork out of it, and it also takes the level of sophistication that otherwise Alaska utilities would need to develop to go into the LNG market themselves. Takes that out. I mean, it's sort of like it's the equivalent, frankly, of buying from Hillcorp. It's a price that you're getting, an all-in price delivered into your system. And so you're really all you really have to measure is whether that price is a reasonable price compared to alternatives coming into your system. And I think that's a good thing out of the announcement, that's the direction in which this is going. So I think it's a positive. If I were the utilities, I might have wanted to highlight it myself. I might have wanted to get out in front and do that announcement myself. But
that may have taken some pressure off of the crisis, Brad. I don't know if we could. I mean, we may need this crisis going into the next legislative cycle. So, I mean, I don't know if we should take any pressure off of that, because we might get something juicy out of that.
And another thing, Michael, is they were talking about 2028 also. I mean, so Chugach, we talked last week about the fact that Chugach had announced that they were looking forward to an LNG solution, a supplemental supply solution by 2028. And we were a little skeptical about that, but Excelerate is talking about the same thing. So I think we're on track here. I think what this demonstrates is we continue to be on track to deal with this. Now, one more time, for those in the back of the room who haven't heard us talk about this before, we're not talking about LNG suddenly displacing the entire Cook Inlet. We're not talking about the Cook Inlet going away, and all of a sudden, we're going to be totally reliant on LNG. We're talking about LNG coming in to handle the shortfall that's occurring in Cook Inlet relative to the market demand. And when I'm starting to run some numbers on this, what I'm doing is sort of factoring in 7 to 10% per year. That as Cook Inlet declines, we're going to have 7 to 10%, an incremental 7 to 10% per year of LNG coming in. And so that's going to soften the impact on price. It's going to soften the impact on, the concerns about, oh my God, we're going to LNG as a supply source. And for those, again, in the back of the room who haven't heard this before, it leaves the door open, much more open for Cook Inlet than I think an onshore plant would leave, in terms of, yes, you're going to have a floating unit. You're going to have a contract with the floating unit to come in and supply a certain amount of price, but those contracts have terms and they have beginning dates and end dates and all sorts of things to them. And if you have a big Cook Inlet find, if somebody's out there and has a Cook Inlet find, then you can back off the floating gas and storage unit. All you've done is you put in some extra pipe to be able to accommodate the receipt of gas from that, but you haven't built a huge amount of onshore kit. And you can accommodate that by backing off the floating gas and storage unit. So it's or storage and regas unit. So it's I think it's a good development and one
sure.
that
because NSTAR's talking about $50 million to build a gasification unit onshore, right? Isn't that? I mean,
no. They're talking about $50 million to build a pipe down to
the Tidewater,
down to Port McKenzie to hook up.
Okay, so a gasification unit is well beyond that. Then, if they start,
we're talking billions, probably. Well, it depends whether we can use the Kenai LNG plant. Whether they use the Kenai LNG plant if they wanted to turn that into an onshore unit, but it's giving more. I mean, this whole development is giving more substance to the fact that there isn't a crisis. We've got a solution to the crisis. Thankfully, we've moved on from this. We've got to subsidize, the Cook Inlet. We got to turn it into a state utility, which is what Walter Featherly, a candidate for the House, argued at one point. We've got to have a state takeover of the Cook Inlet and produce gas. The state's got to produce the gas to ensure the gas is there. We've moved on from that. We've moved on to realistic market-based solutions that I think are showing that this crisis isn't really that much of a crisis, that we've got a solution to it, and the solution's in the near term.
And again, is that maybe I wasn't trying to be facetious when I said they didn't want to talk about it because they don't want to alleviate any pressure on the crisis, but do you see that as a potential as to why none of the utilities talked about this?
Oh, could be. I mean, we talked last week about this being kabuki theater, the whole thing being kabuki theater, that the utilities wanted to act like, they wanted to stay Alaska gas first, and wanted to hang on to Alaska gas first. And they didn't want to be the ones that looked like they were advocating bringing in non-Alaska gas for a portion of the market to meet their needs. And maybe this is still part of the kabuki theater. They want somebody else to be out there in front talking about it, talking and developing the realism of it. And then they'll just sort of slide in behind that once everybody sort of accepted that, yeah, we got a solution. It's a realistic solution, not a bad solution. One we can accommodate and go forward from there.
So in the long run, this is a good thing. Obviously, it gives us more options, and we could wait. Even Brian says, it's all the things you talked about, or the price of natural gas in the Cook Inlet becomes profitable again. One of those things works, but we've got to have a solution now, and this is a good short term. And by short term, I mean 10-year, option as we see these things come out, right?
Yep, exactly right. And to Brian's point, it sets a price signal. I mean, part of the problem with the Cook Inlet has been there's an uncertainty about price, right? I mean, we don't know what the market price is for the Cook Inlet because we don't know what the competitive alternatives are. This will set a competitive alternative to the Cook Inlet. It will set a price marker. We can get gas at this on the international market at X per MCF or X per MMBTU. We can get this on the international market. Now, Is that enough of a price signal, Cook Inlet, for you to develop additional supplies? If not, we've got this alternative supply. But if you can bring it in at that price or cheaper, then great, bring it on. So it has the positive effect of sending a price signal to the Cook Inlet as well.
All right, that brings us to the end of number 2. Number 3, quick tease, Brad, before we jump away.
Number 3 is we're going to go back to something we discussed last week about the permanent fund. I was on David Pruse's
Problem Corner.
Thank you. Problem Corner yesterday, and we had a long conversation about the permanent fund issues, and I think there's something out of that discussion I want to focus on here.
All right, well, we'll continue the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Brad Keithley is our guest. We'll return with a weekly top 3 right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, Brad Keithley, our guest here on the program. Good morning. Good morning, Captain, over on Rumble. It's Greg saying good morning to us. For those of you who don't know, we are now simulcasting no longer on Twitch, because we only ever got 1 or 2 people watching on Twitch. It's more of a gaming thing than anything else. It was just an easy thing to hook up. Rumble, on the other hand, a little more complicated, but finally got it up and running. So if you want to watch it on Rumble, which is very similar to YouTube, but it's more free speechy, you can go over there, rumble.com, and just search up the Michael Duke Show. They don't give you, I don't know why, they don't give you a custom URL like everybody else does. I mean, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show, youtube.com/Michael Duke Show. But no, you apparently got to get verified or something, or have 1 million subscribers or something before they give you a custom URL over on Rumble. Anyway, just search up my name and you can find it over there on Rumble right now. Some people, Greg right now just says he likes Rumble better than Facebook. And some people do. But I guess Facebook still has the most viewers, so we probably won't steer away from Facebook unless they completely kick me off the platform, which I guess is a possibility. I mean, you just never know these days. Brad, I look at this thing with the LNG, and to me, this is all great news, because we don't have to invest billions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars into infrastructure. It can truly be a short-term solution, because it's plug and play, right? You bring it up, you plug it in, you use it till you need it. When it's done, you unhook it and send it on its merry way. It's not infrastructure on shore that would just then be sitting there doing nothing, once it goes through. And of course, it gives us the opportunity. Again, it doesn't short circuit the Cook Inlet and prevent the incentives for new gas discoveries in the Cook Inlet as well. So, I mean, this is all good. This is what we've been talking about for the last year, is that we need some kind of solution like this. People just needed to get off this emotional tie to, it should only be Alaska gas, which I'm not convinced that for some people it was an emotional tie. I think for some people that they're making that argument because it offends them. And I agree, it's offensive that we got 17 trillion cubic feet of gas and we're not going to be burning our own gas. But at the same time, I also understand the realities of it. I think for some, I don't know if I want to use the word insidious, but it's some kind of ploy to strengthen their position, maybe. I don't know.
Well, yeah, there were all sorts of incentives going on. I mean, for the Cook Inlet producers, if they could get subsidies out of the state in terms of either the state subsidizing their development costs, or the state subsidizing their costs by the state foregoing royalty on the production, if the producers could get subsidies out of the state, great. And for the utilities, if they could get the state to subsidize their gas supply costs by subsidizing the producers, and the producers then reducing the price in order to by that amount in order to supply the state, then great for them as well. I mean, it was all about subsidies, right? It was all about, let's have the state in here using the state's money or giving away the state's money to subsidize development costs. And Walter Featherly, I mean, went the farthest of any of them, saying that Ada ought to get in there, Ada ought to buy these fields, and Ada ought to produce the gas. I mean, it was all about getting money from the state, and thankfully, we got through this process last legislative session without a whole lot of commitment. We've got a provision in one of the bills that allows Ada to loan money to the producers, but I haven't seen that exercised yet. I haven't seen, somebody actually proposing that Ada give money to a given producer on these terms. But we got through the legislative session without subsidies, largely without subsidies. And I think that's a great thing. And now we're going to see what the market does. The market looks like it's going to provide us an answer at a price, and we'll see if that price is high enough to elicit additional cook inlet production.
Right.
And so we'll let the market work, as opposed to the direction that we started the year at, which was, forget about the market. We need the state to come in and do all this stuff.
Well, it's interesting to watch, and I'm glad to see that there's at least some movement in that direction, because of course that knock-on effect of South Central Gas on pretty much everyone on the rail line and on the road system that's connected in one way or another, whether it's the Intertie North or down south towards Homer or whatever. It's a big deal, and so I'm hoping that we see what's going on. Cindy said, good debate last night between Carpenter and Bjorkman. Wish we had more debates. I agree. I should have watched it. I wasn't paying attention, so I'm sorry, but that would have been good, because you put those two together, and I guarantee you that Ben probably destroyed Bjorkman on that, because it's interesting to see. All right, we're coming back into it here. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at some of the comments here. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Don't forget, you can check out Brad at ak4sb.com. Just links on the screen there. You can see under his name. We're going to continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Yeah, the show. Brad Keithley continues with us, the weekly top 3. We're down to number 3 of the weekly top 3. And we're back to this discussion yet again of the permanent fund and this idea that's being floated around, the crisis that was manufactured to create this as a scenario, which is the combination and combining of the corpus of the fund, which is untouchable as of right now via the Constitution, to a merging of the corpus of the fund and the earnings reserve account, because there's just not enough money in there. And that's become kind of a clarion call for a lot of these people. Again, I think an artificially created crisis where they can justify this. Why? To get their hands on that corpus, to be able to draw directly from it instead of just from the earnings reserve, and to be able to do what I've been saying for 20 years. They want to it's too big a cookie jar for them not to want to get their hands into. Brad, you saying it's coming back around again. What's your thoughts on it this week?
Well, I wrote a column last week on this whole issue, and the issue is whether the claim that the earnings reserve is so drained that we need to merge the earnings reserve into the permanent fund corpus in order to have enough money to do the things we want to with earnings off of the permanent fund. And the claim was, to reset the stage, the claim was by the ADN op-ed board. The claim was that the permanent fund dividends, paying these huge permanent fund dividends, had drained the earnings reserve down to the point where we needed to seriously consider merging the two funds together. So my column Friday was to disprove that and to show that that the permanent fund dividends is not the issue that's creating this problem. It's the $4 billion withdrawals, ad hoc withdrawals, that were made in 2020 and 2022, fiscal years 2020 and 2022, that have drained out the earnings reserve and brought the earnings reserve to lows. And that column was really focused on proving the point that it's not the permanent fund dividend that's done it. It's these two ad hoc withdrawals. And if you correctly apply the ad hoc withdrawals in the fashion that they were sold as prepayments of inflation proofing. If you correctly apply them as prepayments of inflation proofing, you don't have an earnings reserve problem at all. Because what happens is this $8 billion, the $4 billion ad hoc withdrawals sit in the permanent fund corpus as prepaid inflation proofing. That means you don't have to make an annual contribution to an inflation proofing until that $8 billion is fully amortized. And so the earnings reserve builds back up, if you will, from those two huge withdrawals. The earnings reserve builds back up because you're not having to pay inflation proofing on an annual basis. You've already put all that money into the earnings reserve or into the permanent fund corpus.
Right.
And so that was the real point of my column last week. But yesterday I was on Problem Corner with David Pruse, and David really developed this. The conversation really went in a different. It sort of took that as a base and then went on and said, well, why are these people doing it? Why are they advocating merging the two together? Are they using this so-called crisis as a way to justify merging the two together? And my answer to that is it's fairly simple. I mean, the only reason you merge the two together is to get at the corpus. You're saying that you don't have enough money in the earnings reserve to pay out what you want to pay out, and so you need to merge the two together and take a percent in order to get money out of the corpus. That's the only reason you would merge the two, to get money out of the corpus. And so the conversation went off much more on this is a backdoor way of getting at the permanent fund corpus. This is a backdoor way of cracking open the permanent fund corpus and starting to drain the permanent fund corpus to do the final step or the next step of we drain the SBR, then we drain the CBR, then we drain permanent fund dividends, and now we're going to crack into the corpus and start draining the corpus. And the more we talked about it and the more I've thought about it, this is really a campaign issue. I mean, we've got candidates out there now who are touting, Cliff Grow especially, James Kaufman's another one, who are touting merging these two funds together as part of their fiscal solution. And it's a bad thing to do because you're cracking open the permanent fund corpus. And I think that it's really that this is on track to develop into a big campaign issue. The question is, it's a simple question. Do you want to drain the permanent fund corpus? Are you proposing to create mechanisms to drain the permanent fund corpus? And those and to put Alaska at risk of not having the permanent fund around anymore. And those that are advocating merging the two funds together are doing exactly that.
Right.
So I think it's an issue that needs to be raised out there and talked about and included on the list of questions you ask candidates.
Yeah. Well, because the bottom line is that you're basically suggesting that we eat the seed corn. I mean, to dumb it down to the lowest level, the one thing that's funding the largest revenue generation for the state is the earnings of the permanent fund. And if you start tapping into the corpus, which is the core of that earnings potential, you're eating the seed corn. And, even if it's only $200 or $300 million a year that you're drawing it out, you're drawing that down beyond what the permanent fund is earning. It doesn't take long. And based on the 10-year projection of the deficits that we're talking about now, it's not just $200 or $300 million a year. We're talking $1 billion. And you start hacking away at that $80 billion fund, and then it's 79, and then it's 78, and then it starts to waterfall beyond that with the compounding. Next thing you know, you're taking $2 or $3 billion a year out of the corpus of the fund, and it won't be too long to where there just won't be any money left in there.
Yeah, and the whole thing, that whole scenario starts with merging the two funds together. starts with merging the two accounts together, merging the permanent fund corpus and the earnings reserve. Because right now, the way it's set up, if you run through the earnings reserve, we're not going to do that if we apply those prepayments the way they should be. But if you run through the earnings reserve, that's it. You can't go at the corpus. That's the way it's set up right now. So the corpus is always there. It's always producing earnings. Maybe not the level of earnings that you want. Maybe if you want to spend more, you're going to have to raise that money some other way. But the earnings reserve is a hard stop. This two account approach is a hard stop on rating the corpus. You can't, because it's in the Constitution. You can't get at the corpus. If we merge the two accounts together, you've provided a wide open backdoor into the corpus. And yes, you can say, well, it's not that much now. It's, we're earning 4%. We'd just be taking 5%. So it's only 1% a year, but you've opened the door to going from 5% to saying, well, look, we just need the same amount of revenue. We need the same amount of revenue. So let's forget the 5% cap. We just need the same amount of revenue coming out of the permanent fund that we've had. And maybe if you have a bad earnings year, maybe that's 6% or 7% or 8%. And then, it's not that much to say, well, we need that revenue inflation adjusted. We need more revenue to offset, the drop in oil. And you can see once this door is opened, you can see a path to draining the permanent fund corpus fairly quickly.
Yeah. They've never seen a dollar. They never seen a dollar they didn't want to spend, Brad. Got about 90 seconds here.
So I think it's a campaign issue. I think it's a legitimate question for Jesse Bjorkman. I think it's a legitimate question for James Kaufman. I think it's a legitimate question for Cliff Grow. Are you advocating merging those two accounts? And if so, then you are advocating creating a backdoor into the corpus. And I think that's a legitimate campaign issue to push to press these people on.
No, I mean, I would agree. It's something we haven't talked about in large up until this point, but I think it's definitely something that we should include in our future discussions. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, ak4sb.com on the web if you want to find him out there. He's also on Twitter and YouTube, or Twitter and Facebook. If you want to fight with him, go ahead and go out there and fight with him out there. Brad, thanks so much for coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we're running out of time. We got hour 2 dead ahead. That's coming up, The Michael Duke Show. Chris Story joining us at the end of the hour. Be kind, love one another, live well if you got to go. We will see you later. Thanks for coming in. Hour 2 dead ahead. I mean, Brad, I hate to be the guy that said I told you so, but 1999, 2000, I was talking about this with, at the time, John Coghill, who was one of the most conservative representatives in the legislature at the time. At the time, he was. This is a guy that stood outside the caucus, right? He wouldn't join a caucus. He was adamant about it and everything else. And then all of a sudden there was kind of this flip-flopping, and all of a sudden he was one of the ones behind, that first run at the permanent fund back in the day. Remember when the people voted on it, it was 82% opposed, but he was one of the ones that was advocating for this. And I was like, John, this is going to give you access, eventually to the perm. Oh no, it's, and this is what the whole thing has been about the whole time. That at the time it was only 60 billion, I think at the time, or 58 billion or something. It was still a lot of money, but but I could say this is just the next cookie jar. We've already seen what you want to do. You want to get more. And this is what's been going on for 25 years. This has been the ultimate end game for many of these legislators for the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's clear. Now we have the benefit of looking back on the last decade, right? And draining the statutory budget reserve, the SBR, draining the constitutional budget reserve, the CBR, draining the permanent fund dividend, basically, by deeper and deeper and deeper cuts in that. And these guys, they're not going to stop. If you look forward the next decade, if you look at the Department of Revenue's budget forecast, revenue forecast, spending continues to grow, but oil revenues stay flat. And so where's that additional revenue going to come from? Once you've drained the permanent fund dividend, which we're on track to do, where's that additional revenue going to come from? And the Binkleys are going to tell you it ain't going to come from us. It's time to crack in. It's time to merge those two accounts together and start giving us access to the permanent fund corpus. And that's just the next thing down the road. So we've seen this movie. We've seen where this goes with draining the SBR, draining the CBR, draining the permanent fund dividend. Now we've seen what this movie is, and shame on us if we don't say, wait, we got a way of stopping this, which is to keep the two accounts as they are, to keep that hard stop that the two account system gives, to keep the accounts where we are.
Well,
shame on us if we don't enforce that hard stop.
And to stop the accounting gimmicks, right? I mean, not only did we transfer $8 billion over to the corpus that was supposedly pre-inflation proofing that we should be accounting for as inflation proofing until it runs out, but also the fact that they're not accounting for all the dollars that are actually in the earnings reserve. They're accounting for the deficits, but they're not accounting for the, for the debits, but they're not accounting for the deposits in the fund moving forward. Oh, it's only got this much. Well, that's sure. If you only count, this is the same thing Bill Walker did, right? That's the same thing when he said, well, we just don't have any. Well, you're only counting withdrawals, not the future deposits that are going to be coming in as well. All these numbers, the numbers are true in and of themselves. And if you take it out, this is how much will be in there. But that's if you don't account for how much money is going to be deposited in the future as well. It's
right.
It's a half truth. And those are the worst kind because they've got a kernel of truth in them, but you're not getting the full picture. And that's how they do this. They basically do it through omission and innuendo, and people start to panic because they're not taking the time to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, it's all being painted for a reason, forgetting about the prepayments and not counting them as prepayments and then saying the earnings reserve is drained as a result of that. And the accounting mechanism that you're talking about, the advance accounting on costs or on spending, but not the advance accounting on revenues. All of that is to portray the earnings reserve in a very bad light, in the worst possible light you can get it. And that's for the purpose of supporting this run on the two account system, because, the earnings reserve is gone. We're not going to have money. We need to do something about that. Let's crack open access to the corpus to keep it going. And it won't be much. I mean, we won't take much. Sounds like the early days of the raid on the SBR and the CBR. We won't take much, but they will. Once you get, what the last decade has shown us is that once you give them access to something, it will keep going. There will be more and more and more reasons to spend, and fewer constraints on stopping that spending.
You know what we're not even talking about? We've talked about it occasionally on the show, but that nobody's talking about anymore. The fact that we have a constitutional obligation to repay the CBR. It's $10 billion, right? I mean, I think we still owe it $9 billion now. It's got about $1 billion in it, or just under $1 billion. I mean, we have a constitutional obligation. And in fact, was it Jesse Keel or something? They proposed basically reversing the Constitution so we wouldn't have to pay it back. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know right there, I mean, that's a problem. But we're not even talking about that, let alone tapping into the permanent fund. Yeah. So we're not serious about living within our means in the state. That's the final thought. Brad, 20 seconds here.
We've got to ask candidates what their position is on this. This has got to become an issue because they're going to make a run at it next legislative session, and we got to know where these candidates are in this election cycle.
Sure, it'll be this. It'll be the new run at the BSA. It'll be defined benefits. All these things are coming together all at once, and it's going to be painful to watch. All right, Brad Keithley, my friend, thank you. It's been fun.
Michael, thanks for having me.
We'll see you tomorrow, my friend. We'll see you next week. Thanks for coming in. All right, folks, we're out of time. We got to go. Hour 2 is right now. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the interwebs at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends, and good morning. Welcome to it. It is the Michael Dukes Show, and it is the Tuesday edition of the show. We're cranking along here through. We just finished up with Brad Keithley with Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It's always educational and always kind of entertaining to see what Brad thinks is important. I really enjoyed the three topics for today, especially the last one, talking specifically about trying to roll the corpus of the fund and the ERA together. This combining or merging of the permanent fund and the earnings reserve is really, I mean, again, I don't take any, I guess I take satisfaction, maybe not joy, but I take a little satisfaction in saying, I told you so. Now they're saying the quiet part out loud. This is something that I've been warning about for 25 years on this program, that their ultimate goal, their ultimate idea is that they want to, they want to get access to the permanent fund. That's the whole point here, my friends. They want to get access to the permanent fund, and they want to have access to it right now. That's all they want to do. They want to go out there and get their fingers on it because it's just they can't help it. They want that big pot of money, right? That's what they're all about. They're all about getting that big pot of money and getting their fingers on it because they just can't stand having a supply of money that they just don't have access to. We saw the same thing happen with the CBR and the SBR. They were very excited about that as well, and we're happy to take all those monies from that and then never pay it back. As I said, the one thing that nobody's talking about anymore is the fact that we are required to pay back upwards of $10 billion to the Constitutional Budget Reserve. And not only are they not talking about it, they are actively working to try and change it. It was last year that I think it was Jesse Keel, and apologies if that was not Jesse Keel, but I believe it was Jesse Keel who was talking about it, basically saying that he proposed a constitutional amendment that would have removed the requirement for the CBR to be paid back, even though that's written into the Constitution. Tell me that's not crazy. Tell me that is just not pure madness at that point. But that's where we're at. We're at that point where they want to combine. Why? Because they've never seen a dollar that they didn't want to spend. Now, this is going to be a big issue coming up in the next session. I could tell you that already. Why? Because Bert Stedman has maneuvered this whole thing with the deposits from the ERA into the corpus, these two big chunks of money up at $8 billion in total. between these different transfers. The governor did not veto this last $1 billion transfer out there as well. And we could see exactly what's happening. This is going to be the permanent fund board put out a white paper saying this is the only way to save us. The newspapers are already picking up the battle cry, and you could see this is going to be one of the big topics coming into the new session. And Brad's right. We should be asking this of candidates and politicians as they come in, and I'm going to be adding that to my list of things to talk about. The other big thing that we've been talking about, of course, is the school funding. I mean, I told you that they weren't done. I told you that it wasn't going to happen, that they weren't going to let it go, that they've got the one-time funding, but it's not enough, and that the news media is going to be basically their PR arm on this, and it's already starting. Claire Stremple, the Alaska Beacon, put out an article yesterday. Alaska school districts got one-time funding boost. It came too late for many teachers. And now we get into the sad, sad story about all the teachers who got pink slips last year. Now, all right, I wasn't planning on going here, but let me just say that this is all a plan. This has always been a plan. All the teachers' unions and everything else have built their contracts, and all the budgets around all the various communities are all built up, and it's all on purpose at this point. Contracts for teachers' unions are requiring a pink slip if their positions are not funded by a certain date. That date certain is always before the legislature finishes its work. So we know that there's always going to be pressure on the legislature from the public, because it becomes a very public thing when the school districts say, oh, we had to pink slip a bunch of teachers, even though they know that 90% of those teachers will be funded. They know that 90% of those teachers will be going back. But because they can say, truthfully that they pink slipped all these teachers because it's a requirement in the contract that the unions required, they can now use it as a public lever to put pressure on the legislature to give them what they want. It's all planned out. It's all planned out. This story goes on to talk about, and I'm not going to read you the whole story. It is a boo-hoo story. And again, I'm not attacking individual teachers. I'm not attacking teachers in general, but this whole story is full of stories about teachers who have been laid off and they had to change jobs, or they changed career, or they just resigned in frustration. And the whole thing goes through time I read this whole story, and here's what my thought is. Here's what my feeling is. And maybe it's not, maybe this is not a loving Christian-like feeling, but all I can think of is boo-hoo. This is what everybody else in the world goes through. Everyone else goes through uncertainty. Everyone else in the world goes through job insecurity at one time or another. This is what happens to everyone. Somehow we treat government employees, and especially teachers, because we care about teachers. They're obviously teaching our children, right? And so they may have kind of a special place in many people's hearts because they fill an important function, but they act like they should be held sacrosanct and outside of the system and outside of the foibles of reality, where things go up and down, right? Where there are highs and lows, where there are times of plenty and times of famine. And somehow they should be held apart from all that stuff, regardless of the fact that, as I said, they've set this up to fail in the public eye by doing this whole thing with the pink slips and everything else and putting all this public pressure on it. And I mean, I've sat in assembly meetings where teachers have, held up their pink slips or doing some dramatic thing to say, look, we're not being taken care of and we have all this uncertainty. And I'm like, welcome to the party, pal. How many times have we? I mean, I remember having a meeting, man, this is almost 20 years ago, at the radio station where they gathered everybody together and they said, look, we're having a tough time. We're having a real tough time. And if we want to survive, we're going to have to make some changes. And that changes comes to us in a couple options. One, we can start cutting positions to all you different people. And I don't remember how many positions they would have had to cut, but they basically said, or you can all take a minor pay cut, 10% pay cut. And if we do that, then we can survive with it. And so we all agreed, rather than some of us lose our jobs or some of us, then we'll all take the 10% pay cut. Now, did we ever get that back? No. That's just the way it was. But that's the up and down. That's the uncertain. That's life. And it just, it is isolated from the fact that there are ups and downs and highs and lows and swings in everything. One of the best quotes out of this whole article comes from a spokesperson in Dunleavy's office, somebody who I've never heard of. Deputy Press Secretary Grant Robinson said in a statement, the governor believes school districts need more resources, but if they're having issues accounting for their money and or they're having fewer students going into school, we need to have a discussion. The main part of this, a big chunk of this whole problem, is the fact is that enrollment is declining across the state, has been for more than a decade, and is projected to continue to decline. What they're trying to do is they're trying to maintain the budgets, the infrastructure, and the personnel that they've built up with a larger number of students, and they're trying to continue and prop that up with fewer students. Instead of doing like you would do in a private business or in your own private budget, is that if your revenue generation declines, if you're producing fewer widgets or selling fewer widgets, then you would pull your horns in, so to speak. You would downsize. You would, make things more efficient. You would lay off certain portions of it while still maintaining your core. Those are things that any other organization, business, private individual, family has to do, but not government. Well, you've always given us that money, so you should always continue to give us that money, regardless of how many people we're serving. I mean, this is a huge, huge deal. And this story continues on. This whole story, again, in the Alaska Beacon, goes on and on and on about the sad stories of all these educators who've given their life, and they're doing this. And it tells a teacher of a married couple who are both teachers, and they both get laid off, but one gets rehired in one place, and the other one has to take a job in Petersburg, and so now they have to live apart for a year. And those are choices. Those are all choices. And people are affected by that every day. Why should you, as a government employee, as a teacher, not be subject to the vagaries of the market that everyone else faces? What makes you special in that regard? And again, I'm not talking about I'm not trying to attack individual teachers. It could be any government employee or any employee at all. Why should you be isolated from the realities of the market simply because you hold a specific position? But see, they kind of said the quiet part out loud here. This is all part of a plan. And if they don't get what they want, they're going to punish everyone around you, and they're going to show you how bad it is through this. There's a quote in here. They're talking about a teacher in the Anchorage School District who was a health specialist. There was a case for Janelle, who was an Anchorage School Health District specialist until this May, who said this kind of turmoil was constant. Her positions were often grant funded. Well, that's one of the problems. If you get a position that's grant funded, you understand that you may or may not get the grant the following year. You chose to take that position, first and foremost. There's no guarantees with a grant position. That's a whole separate issue. But anyway, she says, She said one of the schools she taught in was threatened with closure. Well, that's because you have fewer students. You have to shrink your footprint to make it all work. Again, that's aside from the point. She said the straw that broke her as an educator was when the district seeking financial relief decided briefly to cut art and health programs from elementary schools. And this is where we see the real deviousness, the Machiavellian type nature of this kind of stuff. How much money do they save by cutting an art program or a health program? Not a whole lot. But what does it cause in the community? Outrage. How dare you cut art? How dare you cut music? How dare you cut all these extra, all these addition? How dare you hurt us? But this is what they do. If they don't get what they want, they hurt you. And they keep on hurting you because you don't give them what they want. They're not making true efficiencies. They're not finding ways to make things better with less. They look at the thing that will hurt the people the most high visibility program that brings the most joy and does a lot of good stuff. And what do? They cut that because they know it will hurt. This story in and of itself tells me one thing. This issue with the school funding is not done. They're going to make it they're going to make it huge. This is going to be, again, the biggest issue going into the next school year. I can guarantee you this is probably going to be the number one issue moving forward until they get what they want. A raise to the BSA. And then in a few years, it'll be, well, we need more MOAR, more. All right, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes. Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
More. Give me more.
That's what it's all out. That's what they just want it all out. Take it all. Grant is a good guy. Okay. Well, I'm all about that. It's good. But I agreed with what he said. I mean, I know he probably didn't write it, but I agreed with what he said. The school needs more resources, but if they're having issues accounting for the money or they're having fewer students, we need to have a discussion. The important part there is the having fewer students. They want to continue to live a champagne lifestyle when their budgets and revenues have been cut back to a beer budget. Well, we've always had these things, so we always need to have these things. That's not how it works in the real world. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. You need to understand that in the real world, people do have job insecurity. They are subject to the vagaries of the market. We can't just act like once you're in there for life, and we've just got to scramble to figure out how to pay for it. No matter what. No matter what your work product is, and in the case of the school districts, it ain't great, by the way. And I'm not blaming that all on the teachers. I'm just saying if your work product is not great, yet you continue to demand to have everything that you're doing protected no matter what, that's a recipe for disaster. And then to act like somehow you're immune to the effects of what's going on in the rest of the world. I mean, why would why would this surprise you? If you want job security, start your own business. And then at least you're only dependent on yourself. Jeannie says the same thing. If you want job security as a teacher, start a tutoring school. There you go. I mean, if that's what you want. Cindy says, you are always expendable. Learn that early in life and you'll never lose sight of hard work. That's the thing. I mean, you have to understand that we are all vulnerable wherever we are. I could lose my job tomorrow. I've always understood that. There is always that insecurity. Greg said, I think I'll go vote today so I don't forget. Yeah, don't forget to go out and vote. Go out and vote right now and get it done so that you're not worried about it on the 20th. As an LEO, says Jeannie, a law enforcement officer, we always had one or two guys who were on the Fed bubble, meaning this is what we're talking about, grant. They were grant-funded positions. It's part of government work. You understand that if it's a grant-funded position, that if the grant dries up next year, you will have to find something else to do. Or you'll have to find some other way to be hired by the same department or organization. All right. Change is constant. It's part of a process to succeed. We've always got to change. Western Alaska is begging for teachers. No teacher is ever without options in Alaska. But see, then they would say, well, but that's not where I want to be. Well, but again, then that's a choice, right? That's a choice. This all comes back to choice. And I think we've built up unrealistic expectations for many of these teachers to say that your position will be forever and it will always be at this level. That's unrealistic because in no other position in the world does it work that way.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
All right. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. You know, look, I'm not trying to come across as, anti-teacher or education or anything else. I just think that there has to be a dose of reality that's played out here amongst all these things. And teachers are only the latest, kind of the latest cadre that we're facing. I mean, we've seen this argument before in government workers. Oh, they're just looking, well, it's part of the defined benefits thing, right? They're just looking for a reason to stay and, to give them reasons to stick around and to be part of it and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, why do they believe that they should be any different than anybody else that's working in a regular, job somewhere else, not have the same pressures, not have the same market forces driving what's happening in their position? I mean, I don't understand why they should somehow be isolated and protected from the, from the effects of the market. If you have a continual decline in your, let's say it's a company, you have a continual decline in your consumer base, right? In the people who are your customer base, people who would purchase your products. If that group is shrinking, do you continue to demand that they pay more for that product? Or do you start cutting down? Do you start, battening down the hatches? Do you start trying to find efficiencies? Do you start trying to shrink the size of your footprint to make all this work because your customer base is shrinking, and you know it's shrinking, and it's predicted to shrink more over the next 10 years. What does your long-term planning look like? But see, they don't ever do any of that in government because they don't have to justify themselves to anybody. They just act like it's just going to continue on the same amount for the same way. And then when it doesn't, or when that money doesn't keep up with what they think it should be through inflation or something else, then they start to, again, tell all these sad, sad stories about these people who this whole news story is, I mean, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I mean, there's got to be almost a dozen different people mentioned in this article and their stories told. 10 or 12 about just how sad it is that they don't have certainty in their life. They don't know if they're going to be rehired next year. They don't know if this or that is going on. All I can say to that is,
welcome to the party, pal.
That is exactly where everyone else is. That is exactly what it's like for pretty much everyone. And I'm sure there's a lot of government employees who feel protected and vindicated, and maybe we're just singling it out for the teachers. I don't know. But there should be nothing in a government employment position that makes you feel like you are totally immune to the forces of the market. Because if it is, it's a lie. It is a lie. Because eventually that bill will come due one way or the other. And either we're all going to have to pay for it through some form of new taxation to pay for all this great stuff, or they will eventually cut if there's no will to generate new revenues. And that's just being part of the system. As I read through this story this morning, I just, I'm not mad. I'm kind of sad. I'm kind of sad that there's person after person here telling their story of victimhood about how I just didn't know, and I can't not have a job next year. I must have a job, so maybe I have to change professions. Well, maybe you do. Maybe you have other options. Maybe you start, like I said, if you really want to be responsible for yourself, maybe you start your own business. Maybe you start a tutoring service. Maybe you start a micro school as a teacher. Maybe you go out to the parents of some of your brightest students and say, I'm starting a micro school, and you're going to do things. Then you'll have some job security because you control the work that you do and everything. I mean, the whole thing is that this comes down to choices. It comes down to choices and options. These people all act like they're completely inured from their own choices. That, it's just not my choice. I should get exactly what I was promised. Life ain't fair. Life is not easy. Life is hard. Life is pain. Anyone who tells you something different is selling something, right? To quote The Princess Bride. What was the testimony in lawmakers in February said our educators are looking for exit strategies. Okay. Yet they have hundreds of open positions out in the villages and out in the bush, in the rural communities. Well, I don't want to go there. I want to live in a town. Well, then that's a choice. That is a choice. We are faced with these kind of choices all the time. Do I stay or do I go? Do I start a new business? Do I go to work for this company? Do I go buy another company from somebody else? Do I indebt myself for years to try and pay this off? Well, I don't know. Do you do this? Do you get a side job? Do you start delivering pizzas or driving a cab? I've done all these things. Why? Because it was a choice. So the whole tone of this article just totally saddens me because it is the victim. They're all victims. They're all victims of a system because you don't care enough. They're all victims of a system because you're just stingy and not willing to pay your fair share in however way you're supposed to pay it so that they can have security and stability. But that's not our place. We need the most efficient thing possible to deliver a decent product. And the problem is, again, on top of that, outside of everything else I just talked about, is that they're not delivering a great work product. That's not necessarily always their fault. There's parental involvement, there's curriculum, there's a lot of other factors. This is not strictly a problem with teachers per se. But on top of everything else, now you're saying you're delivering a work product where only 3 and 4 actually graduate. And of the 3 that graduate, 1 or 2 of them are going to have to go back and take remedial courses to be even go beyond into the next level of like basic math in college. And that some people who are graduating from high school are basically almost functionally illiterate. You're not delivering a great work product. What incentivizes me to go to bat for you in those regards if that's part of the problem? But again, it's a separate issue. You cannot separate yourself out from the forces that are in the market. If you have a smaller student population, you're going to receive less money. If you receive less money, you should pull your horns in, reduce your footprint, streamline your organization, and yes, you're going to have to lay people off. You might have to close facilities. You might have to do all of those things because it's all part and parcel of how the whole system is supposed to function. But because we're not giving everybody what they want, we're the problem. We are the problem. I was not expecting to talk about that for 2 segments, but I did. So I guess it's just because I am irritated, but I'm sad. I'm sad because of all the stories that are being told here and these people acting like they have no choice in the matter on any of this. And they're mad because when they did have to make a choice, that means that they move to somewhere else or they change professions or do something else. That's what happens to us. That's what happens to us all. That's how it works. All right, we got to go. Chris Story's up next, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Yeah. But the children, what about the children? They don't want to do or what to think. They might become libertarians. I know, they might think for themselves. You know, they might think for themselves. We here at the Alaska Study Industry support the formation of the Alaska Study Academy within the public school system. So John. Thank you, John. John is the head of the Alaska Studies Industry. He saves me stuff with more than, you know. Okay. Effortless. Should we get a hold of the story guy here and see what he has to say? Let's see if we can make this phone work here. Hey, look at that.
Good morning, Michael.
Hello, how are you?
Fantastic. Looks like we got hooked up easy this morning.
Yeah, well, you know, sometimes it works, and you have a Roadcaster. Do you use it with your cell phone all the time? Does it work flawlessly?
Yeah. flawlessly, seamlessly every time.
This is my second one. I sent the first one back because it was having a problem with that, and it still has a problem. I don't know. Maybe my phone. It may not be the Roadcaster itself.
You're not an iPhone user, are you? Aren't you a Galaxy or some such
hell
nonsense?
no. I would not have Apple in my house. I would burn my house down if I had an Apple product in it. Anyway, don't tell the insurance company. All right. So today we're going to be talking about effort less. Okay.
It's a great play on word.
I know. It's a word to your mother. All right. This is her favorite show after all, right? All right. Oh, hold on. Let me go. I got to go catch up with the comments in the chat room. So hold the line for just a second. Chris Story, the man from Homer. The budget for teachers and admins on the Kenai Peninsula alone was more than $65 million annually in 2019. They lost my respect when I discovered they were tracking my son for budget money by labeling him as mentally disabled for 10 years to get $5,000 per school year added to their budget as cost for shadowing him at $500 a month. But they were not teaching him. If they were to teach children for real instead of grooming and trafficking, I'd respect them. I don't know if trafficking is the word you want to use there, Elizabeth, because that has some different connotations, maybe tracking, but I understand what you're saying. It becomes a program where the pupil is nothing more than a money pump, right? I mean, it's a revenue center. That's what the kid comes out to. Eisner Wolf says the question is not over on Rumble. He says the question is not should I start a new business? Will the government allow me to start a new business? Well, this is true. David says high school graduates may be functionally illiterate, as you say, MD, but at least they have a high school diploma. Both MD and Shower said they weren't against inflation proofing. Nobody ever said that, I believe was the exact quote. I don't know what Kyle's referencing here. I'm not against inflation proofing. I mean, inflation proofing was an important part, but one of the things with SB 26, as it was explained to us at the time, was that the inflation proofing was baked into that formula, that it was not going to require the same inflation proofing that the statutory dividend required. That's what we were told. I don't remember talking about inflation proofing and saying that we weren't against it, but I'm not against it. I mean, I'm not against inflation proofing if it's part of the process, but which process are we following? Since we have dueling statutes, which one are we following? Are we going to do the inflation proofing on the statutory side, or are we going to do the SB 26 side? You tell me. I'm not against it one way or the other. Brian says I'm on my fourth career, but I'm old. The average millennial has had 12 different jobs by the time they're in their late 30s. 12 different careers, 12 different jobs and careers, I guess I should say. It's a totally different mindset from when I was growing up, and people worked at the same place for 30 or 40 years when I was growing up. That's what you all aspired to. You wanted to get a job at a good place and work there for 25 or 30 years, and then you'd retire. And today it's just they don't even want that. Millennials, Gen Z, whatever the latest gen is of the new workers, they're not even interested in that. They're interested in life experiences. They'd rather work less and go out and do things and make less money. These nomadic lifestyles, people living in vans and nomads and digital nomads working remotely from all over the place. They'd rather have a little less and go out and experience that. It's a totally different mindset. We keep trying to cookie cutter everybody, and it just doesn't work. It's crazy. Anyway, I'm school funding inflation proofing. Oh, on the BSA. Well, sure. I mean, fine. I'm whatever we need to do. All right, we got to go. Chris Story is our guest. We're going to continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing. Whew. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Pain in the what? He never says, I don't know. Maybe it's just a pain in the foot. I mean, it could be a crick in the elbow. not quite sure what he means by that, but we'll take it on faith that it's something good, right? I mean, that's how I should look at it, right, Chris? It should always be positive. Chris Story is our guest. He continues with us this morning to give us our weekly positivity lesson. Hello, Mr. Story. How are you, my friend? What's happening?
Well, I hate to take you to task first thing, but no, you shouldn't always be positive. Remember what Zig Ziglar said: if you take an idiot and motivate him, you have a motivated idiot. So you've got to educate yourself, Michael. Be aware that they're not talking about your ankle or your toe. You're pain somewhere else, and I think the people are all nodding with me right now, going, "We know."
We know exactly where you're a pain. All right, fine. I see how you are. That's okay.
Mhm.
That's okay. I mean, I've been accused of being worse than a motivated idiot, I guess. I mean, what are you going to do? Chris, today you're going to share with us your life coaching lesson, and today you're going to talk about effort less. Effort less. 2 words. Give me what are we talking about here? What's going on?
Price Pritchett is a great West Texan philosopher. Actually, he's made his money, many millions, in the most boring topic I could possibly think of, which is mergers and acquisitions, M&A. He's the foremost expert in helping companies come together, but he's a psychologist, and he put to work his understanding of human beings and our psyche, and to help integrate companies coming together, large companies becoming massive companies. And so from that work, he started in the 70s, he ended up writing a little book called U Squared. And it's about taking a quantum leap in your life and how he has seen people go from, something very small to something incredibly large in their life, whatever it is, defined by themselves through less effort, not working harder, and not even the old, slogan of working smarter. It's not about that. It's maybe a different direction. So in the beginning of his book, it's only a 35-page book, by the way, and it's sold millions of copies. It's worth having on your shelf. He talks about the story of a life and death struggle he witnessed. Well, you're drawn in instantly, but it turns out it's a fly. It's a fly beating its wings against the glass, working harder and harder, attempting to fly through the plate glass, which we all know he's going to end up on the windowsill. It ain't going to make it. 10 feet across the room, 10 feet away, is an open door. All he had to do was stop, reassess, change direction, and fly to freedom. But he expended more and more effort. And, in other words, the effort, the fly's problem wasn't time management. It wasn't a problem that he had with his mission statement, which he wanted to get to freedom. It wasn't that he couldn't see the goal. He could see the goal through the glass. He just couldn't get through the glass. So all he had to do was use less effort and change course, change direction. And with less effort, almost no effort at all, he would have flown to freedom. That's the lesson. It's incredibly simple. It's almost stupid simple, but it's actually incredibly powerful when you stop and think about it.
I mean, this kind of flies in the face of everything that we've talked about here in the last, I don't know, 10 years, you and I, where, everything that we've talked about does require some effort. You're just saying it's not. I guess I'm a little confused here. Again, talk to me like I'm 5. Break this down for me. When it's effortless because it just appears in front of us, or what? Give it to me again.
Well, think about it like this. We've been working towards something in your life, and it's just something's not working out. And you could be like in a classic story that Napoleon Hill told in his great book, Think and Grow Rich. You could quit 3 feet from gold. You could just be so close to meeting your goal or exceeding your own expectations of your life or achieving whatever it is. It could be Olympic gold. It could just simply be a health goal. It could be a financial, starting a business, having a relationship, whatever it is. You can quit just this side of success. Maybe you never even know it. Maybe you never even realize how close you were to winning because you didn't have persistence. It's not about persistence always. It's not about more effort. Cheryl Richardson told a great story as part of her work. She's a life coach, one of the early people that ever even used the term life coach. And She talked about the quality of your life is less about what you add to it and more about what you remove. So in this case, let's just take the fly. The effort he was expending against that glass was wasted. We could all see from 30,000 feet or 2 feet away. He ain't never going to make it through the glass. He doesn't know that. If he had just stopped, reassessed, and gone, I'm putting my effort in the wrong direction. No matter how much harder I work, I'm not going to get any further. On my show, The Backyard Millionaire, I have this phrase where we say that you cannot save your way to wealth, but you can invest your way to fortunes if you can learn to save. And the idea is saving more and harder all by itself isn't going to get you your financial freedom or the success you're looking for. But if you can learn to save a little and you get that habit and then you begin to invest, you'll have and find your fortune. You'll create wealth where you are with what you've got. Same thing with a fly. All you had to do was kind of work effort a little less for just a minute, reassess the situation, reorient, and fly in the direction. Now, through that door, we know that because Price tells us the story, we know that on the other side of the door was freedom, absolute freedom, and outside. But what it could have been in life, metaphorically speaking, you could find at that door, that open door, a hallway. This is where persistence comes in. Now, you might have to fly down that hallway for another 10 or 20 or 30 feet to another open door. So it isn't that it doesn't take persistence or effort or patience. It does. But are you expending your energy against a stone wall? In this case, the window might as well have been made of granite for all the fly's efforts did. It was immutable. It's not going anywhere. He wasn't going to go anywhere. So what are you beating your head against right now that you could stop and say, hold on a second, this isn't working. I can see right now I need to reassess and change course, potentially in the face of, or you might be flying in the face of opposition from friends and family or people telling you you're crazy. What are you nuts? I once told my son-in-law, and I don't say this with pride, I say this with having the clear-eyed hindsight. In the early 2000s, he was going to open his own business. And I said, hold on a second. Maybe it was actually, it was right around 2008. So it wasn't early, it was middle 2000s. Hold on a second. You got a great job. You got a great career. Are you sure you want to take this on? Well, he went on to, in the face of my suggesting he hang tight where he was at his corporate lifestyle, he went on to build a great and big business. And thank goodness he didn't listen to me, because I was telling him to fly right into that window.
Right.
Just keep flying against that window. You'll get through, buddy. And he never would have. It wasn't for him, and he knew better.
Well, and this reminds me of another analogy, maybe because I can't picture myself as a fly. But second, it reminds me of that old analogy of the something along the lines of, you're climbing the ladder, but what if you find out when you get to the top that you're on the wrong wall, kind of thing? Don't be afraid to move the ladder to a different wall. So like you said, you're banging your head against something, you've reached the top of the ladder, or the ladder won't go any higher, and you've realized it's because you've got it up against the wrong wall the whole time. This basically sounds to me like an exhortation to not be afraid to change directions or change tacks, especially if you've come up against something that's insurmountable. If you've topped out in your profession or topped out in your business, maybe something needs to change. And this goes back to what we were kind of talking about in the last segment, is that's life. Sometimes people change careers. And in fact, in this day and age with the younger people, they're not afraid to change careers, where somebody who is not of my generation, but maybe a generation ahead of me, they were looking for that 40-year golden parachute retirement. That is completely alien to a lot of today's young workers.
Yeah, you remind me of what Stephen Covey also said, not just about leaning the ladder against the wrong wall, but also he talked about making incredible time in traffic, and you're making every green light. You're just speeding across this greater metroplex in no time, using a map in Chicago, using a map of Detroit. You're still getting nowhere. So you need to stop, take a look. Hold on a second. Do I have the right map in front of me? And you might find that you do. You might find that, in fact, you are just 3 feet from gold. You might find that you are on the right ladder. You just need 1, 2, or 3 more rungs ahead. I'm reading another really cool book right now that a friend of mine recommended. It's called The Courage to Be Disliked, which you've already mastered, Michael. You got that in
Oh,
spades.
yeah. I got a PhD in that.
Yes, but it's taking a look at what's called Adlerian psychology, or Alfred Adler had created this psychology back kind of contemporary to Freud and Jung. And he, though, talks very much about personal responsibility and your future thinking versus focusing so much on your past causation of what got you to where you are today, and worrying about your past and trying to fix your childhood hurts and pains or misdirections of your well-intended parents. And he says we're all on a field moving forward, but at different paces or at different spots on the field, and encourages us to look at life that way versus ascendancy of a mountain or a hill or climbing something. We're on a field. We're not in competition with each other, rather just who you could be versus who you are. And are you moving forward on that field, or are you standing still?
Right.
Or, heaven forbid, moving backward towards some other cause that was outside of my control? We can have all the plans in the world, and like Mike Tyson said, a plan is great till you get punched in the face. Everybody's got a plan till you get hit in the face.
Right.
And that's life. Life can hit
Right.
you in the face or catch you on the blind side.
Down to the last 2 minutes here, I would just say, something I'm reminded of is that a lot of us pride ourselves in working hard. I work incredibly hard. I mean, I work a lot of hours. I do that, but at times I step back and I say, okay, is what I'm doing, am I right? Am I on the right wall? Am I banging against the window? Right. And I think sometimes people are afraid to do that. They think that hard work is the only thing, but are you working smart as well as working hard? And I think that's did I summate kind of what you're saying here? Are you moving in the right direction?
Yeah. And you might be, and it's okay to stop, take an assessment and go, you know what? Yeah, I actually am going in the right direction. Fantastic. Keep going. That'll bolster your persistence and patience and your willingness to keep moving forward. Whereas some of us stop and take a look and go, you know what? I'm going to let this go. This isn't serving me anymore. This relationship is actually toxic. This path that I thought I really wanted, actually, I don't really want that. I'm going to start moving this direction. And you can take a quantum leap. And to Price Pritchett said, don't worry about how you're going to get there. Aim at where you want to go.
Right. Well, it's good advice. Are you banging against the wall, the window? Is your ladder on the wrong wall? Maybe you need to take a look and work smarter, not harder. I mean, I think that's kind of the bottom line here. Chris Story, thank you, my friend. As always, you're a breath of fresh air. Appreciate you coming on board.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, folks, we are out of time for today. Tomorrow is Mike Shower. Also working on something else. Sarah Vance on Thursday. Maybe Nancy Dahlstrom. We'll see. The Michael Duke Show. Be kind, love one another, live well. Okay. Well, that says it all for me today. I think I'm done. Appreciate you guys all being part of it today. Thank you for coming out on Rumble. If you're on Rumble right now, make sure that you subscribe or follow, I guess. I guess you don't have to. Subscribe is a $1 thing. You don't have to give money, but just go ahead and follow. Hit the follow button down there. I'm confused. There's different things you could. If you subscribe, you got to pay money. You don't have to pay money. I mean, you could pay money. I'm all about that. Put some shoes on my kids' feet. Don't you care about the children? If you care about the children, you can go check out the Common Sense Corps. That's where you as little as a few bucks a month, you can help put coffee in my cup or shoes on my children's feet. And, of course, help support the show as well. Other than that, follow us on Rumble, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, the whole schmear. Thank you so much for coming on board with us today, guys. Good discussions. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Again, Mike Shower is going to be joining us, and we'll see what he has to say. Working on a guest for hour 1, and then on Thursday, Sarah Vance in hour 2, potentially. I got somebody reached out from the Dahlstrom campaign. Apparently, they heard me talking yesterday, so I guess we'll see if we can get somebody on from Nancy Dahlstrom's campaign as well. All right. We will return tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., bright and early. And remember, be kind, love one another. Love those that despitefully use you. Just be kind. Kill them with kindness. Live well. The Michael Duke Show.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.